Catherine Bach, born Catherine Bachman, March 1, 1954, is an American actress. She is known for playing Daisy Duke in the television series The Dukes of Hazzard and Margot Dutton in African Skies. 2. In 2012, she joined the cast of the CBS soap opera The Young and the Restless as Anita Lawson. 3. Early life. Bach was born in Warren, Ohio, the daughter of Norma Jean Cusera née Verdugo, an acupuncturist, and Bernard P. Bachman, a rancher. 4. Her mother was a daughter of Antonio L. Verdugo of Bisbee, Arizona, a baker born in Mexico. 5. While her father was of German ancestry, she was raised in Warren, Ohio. 6. 7. Her mother, born into the Verdugo family. 8. Claimed to be descended from one of oldest Californio families. 9. She spent some of her childhood on a ranch in South Dakota. 10. When she visited her grandparents in Faith, South Dakota. In 1970, Bach graduated from Stevens High School in Rapid City, South Dakota. She briefly majored in drama at UCLA, where she supplemented her income by making clothes for friends and theater groups. 10. Career. Bach's professional debut was as one of the children in a production of The Sound of Music. 11. Bach's first screen appearance was in the Burt Lancaster murder mystery, The Midnight Man, shot in upstate South Carolina in 1973, in which she played murder victim Natalie Claiborne. Her next role was Melody in the 1974 film Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. Bach heard about the audition for the Dukes of Hazzard through her husband. 12. When she arrived there, she found the producers were looking for a Dolly Parton lookalike. Despite not looking like what they were searching for, she was hired on the spot. 13. One of the earliest costume ideas from the producers was that she wear a tight white turtleneck, go-go boots, and a poodle skirt, but Bach asked if she could bring her own outfit, which was a homemade t-shirt, a pair of cut-off denim shorts, and high heels. 14. Bach had concerns about the appropriateness of the cut-off shorts at first, saying she could not wear them in a restaurant scene. When prompted by the producers to visit a restaurant across the street, Bach found the waitresses were wearing little mini-skirts that matched the tablecloths. 12. This style of cut-off denim shorts is now popularly known as Daisy Dukes in reference to Bach's character of that name from the show. She starred on The Dukes of Hazzard opposite Tom Wopat, John Schneider, and James Best. At the suggestion of the show's producers, Bach posed as Daisy Duke for a poster, which sold 5 million copies. 15. The poster once caused a stir when Nancy Reagan took a liking to it after Bach visited the White House with one as a gift for one of her former schoolteachers then working there. 16. While she was starring on The Dukes of Hazzard, her legs were insured for 1,000,000. 17. In 1985, she served as the model for the figurehead for the schooner Californian. 9. After the series ended, Bach had roles in a number of low-profile films. From 1992 to 1994, she starred in the Canadian family drama series African Skies. 18. In 2006, she guest starred on Monk, and in 2010 had a small cameo in the comedy film You Again. In 2012, Bach joined the cast of CBS daytime soap opera, The Young and the Restless, in the recurring role of Anita Lawson. 3. In 2002, Bach launched a line of diamond jewelry at Debenhams. 10. Personal life. Bach married David Shaw's stepson of Angela Lansbury, 11, in 1976. The couple divorced in 1981. Bach married entertainment lawyer Peter Lopez in August 1990. They had 2 daughters. On April 30, 2010, 60-year-old Lopez was found shot dead in an apparent suicide. 19. Bach is Catholic. On October 30, 2025. Bach's Dukes of Hazzard co-star Ben Jones announced on social media that Bach was forced to cancel an appearance at Cooter's Place as she had been hospitalized in Los Angeles due to an embolism that developed as a result of a recent surgery. Bach's other Dukes of Hazzard co-stars Tom Wopat and John Schneider posted on social media offering their thoughts and prayers as she recovered. 21. Bach was released from the hospital a few days later and was spotted out walking her dog on November 5, 2025. 22. Production. Walter Wanger had long desired to produce a biographical film about Cleopatra. As an undergraduate at Dartmouth College, he first read Théophile Gautier's fantasy novel One of Cleopatra's Nights and Other Fantastic Romances, and then Thomas North's 1579 English translation of Plutarch's Lives and William Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra. 7. Wanger had envisioned Cleopatra as the quintessence of youthful femininity, of womanliness and strength. But it was not until he watched Elizabeth Taylor in A Place in the Sun, 1951, that he found his ideal candidate for the role. 7. Around this time, Wanger had discovered through a private detective that his wife, Joan Bennett, was having an affair with her talent agent Jennings Lang. On the afternoon of December 13, 1951, Wanger shot Lang twice after having spotted him with Bennett in a parking lot near Macau. 8. Lang survived, and Wanger, pleading insanity, served 4 months in prison at the Castaic Honor Farm, north of Los Angeles. 9. Following his release, Wanger had achieved a career comeback, having produced Invasion of the Body Snatchers 1956 and I Want to Live 1958, in which Susan Hayward won the Academy Award for Best Actress. He would soon return to his dream project of a Cleopatra biographical film. 10. Development. Wanger pitched the idea to various film studios, including Monogram and RKO Pictures. 11. He also approached Taylor and her husband Michael Todd about producing the project with United Artists. 12. Taylor expressed interest in the project but delegated the decision to Todd. Meanwhile, 20th Century Fox was in financial trouble following its severe box office losses of The Barbarian and the Geisha, A Certain Smile and The Roots of Heaven, all released in 1958. 13. To reverse the studio's fortunes, studio president Skouras requested that studio executive David Brown find a viable project that would be a big picture. Brown suggested a remake of Cleopatra 1917, which had starred Theda Bara. 14. In the fall of 1958, Wanger's production company entered into a co-production agreement with 20th Century Fox. Wanger pitched 4 properties: Cleopatra, Justine, The Dud Avocado, and The Fall for the executives to consider. They selected the first 3, and Cleopatra was the first to enter into production. 12. On September 15, Wanger purchased the screen rights to Carlo Mario Franzero's biography The Life and Times of Cleopatra. 15. On September 30, Skouras held his first meeting with Wanger and asked his secretary to retrieve the screenplay for the 1917 version of Cleopatra. Skouras insisted, "All this needs is a little rewriting. Just give me this over again and we'll make a lot of money." Because the original screenplay had been written for a silent film, the script mostly contained instructions for camera setups. 16. In December 1958, Ludi Claire, a writer and former actress, was hired to write a rough draft of the script. That same month, art director John DeCure was hired to produce conceptual artwork to illustrate the visual scale of the project. 17. In March 1959, English author Nigel Balchin was hired to write another script draft. 18. Meanwhile, Wanger had approached Alfred Hitchcock to direct the film, having worked with him on Foreign Correspondent 1940, but Hitchcock declined. Skouras then selected Rauben Mamoulian, who had worked with Wanger on Applause 1929, to direct. 19. With Mamoulian as director, Balchin's script pleased neither him nor Taylor, who felt that the first act was forced and that Cleopatra lacked sufficient characterization. 2021, based on his recently aired Don Quixote episode in the CBS anthology series DuPont Show of the Month, Dale Wasserman was selected to complete the final draft. Wanger instructed him to focus all attention on Cleopatra as the central role. Wasserman recounted that he had never met Taylor, so he watched her earlier films to better acquaint himself with her acting style. 22. In the spring of 1960, English novelist Lawrence Durrell was hired to rewrite the script. 20. Casting. At a meeting in October 1958, production head Buddy Adler favored a relatively cheap production of $2 million, with one of Fox's contract actresses, such as Joan Collins, who tested extensively for the part, Joanne Woodward or model Susie Parker in the title role. Wanger protested, envisioning a much more opulent epic with a voluptuous actress as Cleopatra. 23-24, Wanger suggested Susan Hayward. 25, while Audrey Hepburn, Sophia Loren, and Gina Lollobrigida were also under consideration. 26, when Mamoulian was hired to direct, he had offered the title role to Dorothy Dandridge, an African-American, during a lunch meeting at the Romanoff's restaurant in Beverly Hills. 27, Dandridge replied, "You won't have the guts to go through with this, they are going to talk you out of it." 28. In September 1959, Wanger contacted Taylor again on the set of Suddenly last summer 1959, and Taylor half-jokingly asked for a record-setting contract of $1 million, $10.8 million in 2024-6, plus 10% of the box office gross. 26-29 on October 15. A contract signing event was staged inside Adler's office where Taylor signed blank papers because the real contract would not be ready for months. 30. Wanger had considered Laurence Olivier and Rex Harrison for the role of Julius Caesar and Richard Burton for Mark Antony. However, the studios refused to approve Harrison and Burton. 12. On July 28, 1960, Taylor signed a real contract. It was also stipulated that the film would be shot in Europe and in the Todd-AO format, developed by Taylor's late husband Mike Todd, who had died in 1958, which ensured that Taylor would receive additional royalties. 10. In January 1960, Stephen Boyd was approached by Wanger about being cast as Mark Antony, but felt he was too young for the role. 31 In August 1960, Boyd was cast as Mark Antony, Peter Finch as Julius Caesar. 32 And Keith Baxter as Octavian. 33 Mamoulian had also cast Elizabeth Welch to portray one of Cleopatra's handmaidens. 27 Filming. Production under Reuben Mamoulian. Left, costume worn by Richard Burton in the film, displayed at the Cinecittà Studios in Rome. Right, headdress worn by Elizabeth Taylor in the film. With Mamoulian as director, construction on the Alexandria exteriors was already underway on the studio's backlot. 27 London was also seen as a viable choice for hosting the production. The Edie levy had offered financial incentives to American film studios as long as a certain percentage of the primary cast and production crew were English. 34 There, the production would be supervised by Robert Goldstein, the studio's foreign head of production. 35 A number of other countries, including Turkey and Egypt, were considered for exterior locations. 36 In 1960, Adler entered into a co-production deal with Italian producer Lionello Santi, who had recently completed a foreign-language version of Cleopatra that the studio purchased to keep away from the American market. 35 Mamoulian traveled to Italy for location scouting and reported back the difficulties upon shooting there. 37 Furthermore, the impending Rome Summer Olympics threatened to complicate filming accommodations. 27 On April 20, 1960, Santi issued a full-page ad in Variety announcing his forthcoming production of Cleopatra without mentioning 20th Century Fox's involvement. 38 Angered, Adler shifted the entire production to Pinewood Studios, England. 35 On July 11, Adler died from cancer and was replaced by Goldstein. 39 Skouras asked Wanger to assume Goldstein's former position, but months later he was replaced by Seed Rogel. 40 Meanwhile, Wanger cautioned about shooting in England in a July 15 studio memo, stating that the weather conditions could jeopardize Taylor's health and the labor force was insufficient. However, Skouras had overruled his decision. 12 Principal photography began at Pinewood Studios on September 28, 1960. On the same day, the British Hairdressers Union threatened to leave production, as Taylor had brought Sidney Gilleroff, an American hairstylist. A settlement was reached that Gilleroff would be allowed to style Taylor's hair, but only at her Dorchester suite. 26 Soon after, Taylor shot a nude scene in 40-degree weather, 4-9 degrees C, and became sick with a sore throat. 41 Rendering her unable to work for 2 weeks. Mamoulian was then forced to proceed filming without Taylor, instead shooting scenes with Finch and Boyd. 42 Taylor's cold soon progressed into a lingering fever, and for the next few weeks she was treated by several doctors, including Lord Evans, Queen Elizabeth II's physician. 26 On November 13, Taylor's fever reached 103 degrees F, 39 degrees C, and she was diagnosed with meningitis. 43 By November 19, Wanger indefinitely postponed shooting, giving studio employees 2 weeks' notice until Taylor's health recovered. 44 Taylor remained hospitalized for a week and then flew to Palm Springs, Florida with husband Eddie Fisher to recuperate. 46 The Lloyd's of London Insurance Agency paid $2 million to cover Taylor's medical expenses. 47 During the pause in filming, Nunley Johnson was hired to write a new script. Johnson wrote a 75-page draft for the first half of the film, mostly involving Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, that was similar in its tone to that of Cecil B. DeMille's Cleopatra 1934, and Caesar and Cleopatra 1945. 48 Filming resumed on January 3, 1961, but Mamoulian was dissatisfied with Johnson's script. Taylor, who expressed similar displeasure, then appealed for Paddy Chayefsky to write a new script. Chayefsky demurred, saying that a rewrite would take 6 months. 49 After 16 weeks of filming and costs of $7 million, the crew had produced just 10 minutes of usable film. 46 Skouras blamed Mamoulian for the production having exceeded its budget. On January 18, 1961, Mamoulian resigned as director. Mankiewicz takes over. Mark Antony lived always in the shadow of Caesar. JLM sees Antony as a bad replica of Caesar, following desperately in Caesar's footsteps but rattling loosely in battlefield, in the Senate, and in Caesar's bed. He sees this inability to match Caesar as the cause of Antony's excessive drinking and eccentric behavior. Antony's conquest of Cleopatra is his only triumph over Caesar. Then he realizes he has not conquered but has been conquered, and this leads to his ultimate self-destruction. Wanger on Mankiewicz's modern, psychiatrically rooted concept for Cleopatra 53. To replace Mamoulian, Taylor announced that she would approve either George Stevens, who had directed her in A Place in the Sun, or Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who had directed her in Suddenly last summer 1959. 54. At the time, Mankiewicz was vacationing at the Children's Bay Key, Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy's private island in the Bahamas. He had completed a 151-page treatment outline and written a partially complete first screenplay draft for a film adaptation of Lawrence Durrell's novel Justine, which was also a Walter Wanger production. 55. Mankiewicz initially declined the offer during a lunch meeting with Skouras and his agent Charles K. Feldman at the Colony Restaurant. Feldman persuaded Mankiewicz to take the job of directing Cleopatra under the advice, "Hold your nose for 15 weeks and get it over with." 56. Mankiewicz reconsidered, agreeing to write and direct the project. 57. As an additional incentive, Skouras acquired Figaro Inc., Mankiewicz's independent production company, for $3 million. In addition to his salary as writer and director, Mankiewicz received $1.5 million from the purchase, while his partner NBC received the other half, 48, having directed Julius Caesar 1953. Mankiewicz expressed his displeasure with the shooting script, stating it was unreadable and unshootable. Mankiewicz also described Cleopatra's depiction as a strange, frustrating mixture of an American soap opera virgin and an hysterical Slavic vamp of the type Nazimova used to play. 58. Because of this, he asked to rewrite the script from scratch, and the studio allowed him 2 months. 59. By February 1961, Mankiewicz had conceived a modern, psychiatrically rooted concept of the film, envisioning Mark Antony's self-destruction because of his inability to match Julius Caesar. 53. Within 1 month, Lawrence Durrell and Sidney Buchman were recruited to collaborate with Mankiewicz on the new script. Story conferences were held with the 3 writers, and Durrell and Buchman then separately wrote story step outlines. Mankiewicz would expand their outlines into a new script. 60. Mankiewicz consulted the relevant sources, adapting historical literature written by Plutarch and Petronius. 61. In late April, Mankiewicz had grown displeased with Durrell's work, while Buchman was instructed to complete an outline for the film. By then, Buchman's outline only covered the first quarter of the film. Mankiewicz had petitioned for playwrights Lillian Hellman or Paul Osborne to help finish the script, but Wanger hired screenwriter Ranald MacDougall. 62-63. Although filming was set to resume on April 4, 1961, Taylor was hospitalized again for pneumonia on March 4. One news agency erroneously reported that she had died. She recovered after a tracheotomy was performed on her throat. 64. On March 14, 20th Century Fox suspended production at Pinewood Studios. The sets were dismantled at the cost of $600,000, equivalent to $6,377,278 in 2024. 65. Skouras then decided to relocate the production to the studio's backlot in California. Meanwhile, Mankiewicz temporarily left his writing duties and scouted for suitable filming locations in Rome and Egypt. In June, Mankiewicz returned to the studio to report some Italian locations he had found, but was not eager to shoot in Egypt. On June 30, Skouras reversed his decision and agreed to allow Mankiewicz shoot the film at Cinecittà in Rome, where the sound stages had been occupied for the studio's television series and George Stevens' The Greatest Story Ever Told, 1965. 66. However, in September 1961, Skouras had indefinitely postponed The Greatest Story Ever Told due to presumptive cost concerns. 67. In Italy, the production was divided between 2 locations, with the Roman Forum constructed on 12 acres at Cinecittà and the Alexandria sets near Anzio. 68. During construction of the Alexandrian sets, active landmines from World War II were discovered along a private beach. Thus, demolition experts were hired to remove the explosives. Wanger was also troubled to learn NATO had held a nearby shooting range for target practice. 69. Casting and personnel changes. During the interim, Finch and Boyd had left the production for other commitments, and each was paid his remaining salary. Laurence Olivier and Trevor Howard had turned down the role of Julius Caesar. Rex Harrison, who was the studio's 4th choice, was then cast. 47. Mankiewicz then suggested Marlon Brando as Mark Antony, but Richard Burton landed the role after Taylor had seen him as King Arthur in the Broadway musical Camelot. 20th Century Fox paid Burton $250,000 plus $50,000 to buy out his contract. 47. Roddy McDowall, who was also appearing in Camelot, was cast as Octavian. 70. Mankiewicz had also insisted on casting John Valva, McDowall's close friend, creating an original character named Valvis. 71. By mid-September 1961, Canadian actor Hume Cronin, several American actors, including Martin Landau and Carol O'Connor, and several English actors such as Kenneth Haig, Robert Stevens, and Michael Hordern, were cast in supporting roles. 72. Jack Hildyard had resigned as cinematographer when Mamoulian agreed to step down as director. 52, he was replaced by Leon Shammer. 70, Shammer had been the director of photography on The Robe 1953, the first movie shot in CinemaScope, and had shot South Pacific 1958 in the Todd AO widescreen process that was being used in Cleopatra. Shammer would win his 4th Oscar for the film. In January 1962, Andrew Martin was brought in as second unit director, replacing Ray Kellogg. 73, Martin had worked on the first initial shoot. 74, John DeCure was still kept as production designer. 72. Filming resumes in Rome. Richard Burton as Mark Antony with Taylor as Cleopatra. On September 25, 1961, principal photography began on the revamped production of Cleopatra. 75, Mankiewicz had expressed his intention of directing a 2-part epic. I had in mind 2 separate but closely linked Elizabeth Taylor films, Caesar and Cleopatra and Antony and Cleopatra, each to run 3 hours, both segments to receive simultaneous release. Moreover, I felt compelled to undertake the writing of both halves myself, a measure of my total dissatisfaction with the material that had been produced to date. At that time, he had completed 132 pages of the shooting script, with another 195 pages that remained to be written, so Mankiewicz shot the film in sequence, leaving several actors waiting indefinitely until their scenes were ready to be shot. For the first few months of filming, he filmed scenes during the daytime and wrote the script at night, resorting to amphetamine injections and wearing protective gloves because he contracted dermatitis in both hands. 77-78, overwhelmed in February 1962, Mankiewicz rehired Mac Dougall to script several battle scenes, particularly those of Moongate and Actium, and the final 50 remaining pages of the second half. 79. On January 22, 1962, Taylor and Burton filmed their first scene together. Wanger observed in his journal, "There comes a time during the making of a movie when the actors become the characters they play." It was quiet, and you could almost feel the electricity between Liz and Burton. In February 1962, rumors of the extramarital affair were spreading, so much that Mankiewicz told Wanger in his hotel room, "I have been sitting on a volcano all alone for too long, and I want to give you some facts you ought to know. Liz and Burton are not just playing Antony and Cleopatra." At the time, Taylor was married to her 4th husband, Eddie Fisher, a relationship that also began with an affair as he was married to Debbie Reynolds at the time, and Burton was married to his first wife, Sybil Williams. By the spring, the extramarital affair became worldwide news, with the couple branded as Liz and Dick. The Vatican City newspaper El Osservatore Romano published an open letter that condemned Taylor for her erotic vagrancy. 82, meanwhile, Leon Shammer, the cinematographer, had collapsed from exhaustion, and Forrest Johnny Johnston, the production manager, fell gravely ill and exited the production. He died in Los Angeles the following May. 81. By late May 1962, most of the palace scenes were finished, but the remaining sequences, including those of the Battle of Pharsalus and Actium, the arrival of Cleopatra in Tarsus, and Antony's confrontation with Octavian's legions, were not yet filmed. Some of these sequences were to be shot in Egypt. 83, back in California, Fox had posted an annual loss for fiscal year 1961, with blame directed at the looming production costs of Cleopatra. As a result, Skouras assured shareholders that he was preparing to take drastic measures to reduce expenditures. 84, on June 11, Fox canceled the already delayed film Something's Got to Give, which had starred Marilyn Monroe and Dean Martin. 85. From June 15, Fox executives Peter Levathes, Otto Kogel, and Joseph Moskowitz, whom Wanger jokingly named as the 3 wise men, arrived on set to cancel the scheduled shoot of the Battle of Pharsalus. The committee informally fired Wanger by discontinuing his salary and expense account, demanded that Taylor's salary be terminated on June 9, and that all filming be halted by June 30. 86-87, Mankiewicz refused to commit to the new terms and sent a memo to then-studio chairman Samuel Rosenman requesting for Taylor's availability to be extended. In response, Rosenman permitted Taylor to work until June 23, 88. On June 12, Wanger's firing was first reported by columnist Earl Wilson. Mankiewicz had read Wilson's column and asked Louis Doc Merman, the studio's production manager, to assume Wanger's position and thereby reinstate the filming of several sequences that were cut. Taylor and Burton, angered over Wanger's dismissal, had planned to protest unless Wanger was reinstated. Back in Los Angeles, Merman consulted with Levathes, in which they both agreed that Wanger would remain as producer. 89. In haste, the filming unit relocated to Ischia, off the coast of Italy where the Battle of Actium was shot. The scene of Cleopatra's arrival aboard her barge in Tarsus was completed on June 23, which was Taylor's last day on set 90 on June 26, 1962. Skouras announced his resignation as studio president, effective on September 30, 91. On July 25, Darryl F. Zanuck was elected as the new president of Fox, while Skouras became the new chairman of the board. 92. Zanuck then fired Levathes, replacing him with his son Richard D. Zanuck. 93. During the middle of July, Mankiewicz was filming on location in Edku, located east of Alexandria. One day, while receiving his stimulant injections, one shot accidentally hit his sciatic nerve, rendering him immobile. 94. Mankiewicz recalled, "I was in agony and had to get around by hobbling on a cane, or by wheelchair." DeCure also remembered Mankiewicz was scribbling the last pages of the script while being carried on a stretcher. Principal photography ended on July 28, under Andrew Martin's second unit. 96. Post-production. Post-production work on Cleopatra had left the film's editorial team with 120 miles, 630,000 FT of exposed footage. 50. In Los Angeles, Mankiewicz and his editor Dorothy Spencer prepared a rough cut that ran 5 hours and 20 minutes. 97. On August 31, 1962. Zanuck wrote to Mankiewicz stating he wanted to see a completed first cut and a progress report no later than the first week of October. 98. On October 13, Mankiewicz arranged a private screening of the film's 4.5-hour rough cut for Zanuck in Paris. 99. According to Zanuck's account, he was shocked after having seen the first cut and asked to see the sequences that had been cut and decided some of them should be restored. But I found to my astonishment that no loops had been made for certain eliminated episodes. 100. Another account states Zanuck felt the rough cut was beautifully written, beautifully directed, and beautifully staged, but was dissatisfied with the battle sequences. They finished the screening on Sunday morning, October 14. 101. After the screening was over, Zanuck rejected Mankiewicz's plea to distribute Cleopatra in 2 separate installments, believing audiences interested in the Taylor Burton affair would not attend the first installment. 97. He was further displeased with Cleopatra's dominance over Mark Antony, remarking, "If any woman behaved towards me like Cleopatra treated Antony, I would cut her balls off." 102. I made the first cut, but after that, it's the studio's property. They could cut it up into banjo picks if they want. Mankiewicz to Newsweek 99. Alternately, DeCure, who was present after the screening, stated Zanuck asked for the film to be cut to 3 hours and 15 minutes. 103. Zanuck canceled the scheduled meeting for the next day, at which it was planned to discuss the film more in detail, and departed from Paris. Meanwhile, Mankiewicz continued the dubbing sessions with Taylor and Burton. 101-104. For several days, Zanuck ignored Mankiewicz's calls for another meeting, to which Mankiewicz later learned that Zanuck had hired editor and director Elmo Williams to supervise the completion and final editing of the film. 105. Working to insert the deleted sequences. 101. Williams had spent 3 consecutive 16-hour days, removing a total of 33 minutes from the original 4-hour cut. Williams explained, "When Mankiewicz first saw my version, he began ranting and raving and carrying on. He had finally given up the idea of releasing the picture as 2 separate films, but he hadn't counted on the released version being reduced in length." 105. According to Zanuck, Mankiewicz had grown angry and demanded the sole responsibility of editing the film. Mankiewicz, however, denied there was any direct confrontation, stating their disagreements were exchanged through letters. On October 20, Mankiewicz sent a letter to Zanuck requesting an honest and unequivocal statement of where I stand in relation to Cleopatra. A day later, Zanuck issued a 9-page response blaming him for the film's excessive production costs. 107. He further concluded, "On completion of the dubbing, your official services will be terminated. If you are available and willing, I will call upon you to screen the re-edited version of the film." A few days later, Zanuck issued a press release stating, "In exchange for top compensation and a considerable expense account, Mr. Joseph Mankiewicz has for 2 years spent his time, talent, and $35 million of 20th Century Fox's shareholders' money to direct and complete the first cut of the film Cleopatra. He has earned a well-deserved rest." Mankiewicz's dismissal from the project was harshly criticized by Taylor and Burton. Taylor responded, "What has happened to Mr. Mankiewicz is disgraceful, degrading, particularly humiliating. I am terribly upset. Mr. Mankiewicz has put 2 years of his life into Cleopatra, and the film is his and Mr. Wanger's. Mr. Mankiewicz took Cleopatra over when it was nothing, when it was rubbish, and he made something out of it. He certainly should have been given the chance to cut it." It is appalling. 108. Burton separately telephoned, "I think Mr. Mankiewicz might have made the first really good epic film. Now Cleopatra may be in trouble." 108. On October 30, Mankiewicz flew back to his East Side townhouse where he held a press conference, insisting he had never demanded control nor disputed the studio's right to the final word on the finished cut. Instead, he stated he had wanted to present the film to Fox and/or Zanuck as I saw it and be permitted to discuss with him my ideas for the picture. 109. On December 7, the New York Times reported that Mankiewicz would likely rejoin the production after having an extremely constructive conference with Zanuck. Both had agreed that new scenes with Harrison and Burton were needed for the film. 110, Zanuck explained that he would bend over backwards, artistically so that I wouldn't have to exercise my rights as president unless it became absolutely essential. Joe accepted that, took the scenes that I had blocked out crudely and roughly, went to work with them and wrote them. The new sequences included those meant to strengthen Antony's character so he would stand up to Cleopatra. 111. Mankiewicz was reinstated as director, and thereby he partially restored several deleted sequences including scenes of Sosthenes tutoring Cleopatra. 102. In February 1963, several members of the cast, along with 1,500 extras, were called back to reshoot the Battle of Pharsalis in Almeria, Spain. 112 Mankiewicz then returned to London for 8 consecutive days to reshoot new scenes with Burton at Pinewood Studios. The retakes primarily concerned Antony's scenes with his fourth wife Octavia and his companion, Rufio. On March 5, 1963, filming was finally completed. The earliest known attempt to restore missing footage to the film was when Joseph L. Mankiewicz appeared on The Dick Cavett Show in the late 1970s. He stated he had always wanted Cleopatra to be 2 films, thus setting off the first recovery attempt. 114, each movie was expected to run under 3 hours long, for a total runtime around 5 + 1 2 hours. 115, following the death of Richard Burton in 1984, interest was renewed in restoring the lost footage of Cleopatra. Brad Gigli, a film scholar and self-professed fan of the 1963 film, spent a considerable amount of time attempting to secure the missing footage. 115, however, by the late 1970s, Fox had destroyed trims and outtakes from their studio archives from films produced before 1979 to save on costs. When Gigli discovered this decades later, he concluded Cleopatra's elements are forever missing. 114. By the mid-1990s, before learning of the destruction, film preservationists consulted film laboratories in Los Angeles, New York, London, and Rome, along with Fox's own archives. Several reels of B-roll footage from Cleopatra were located in a salt mine in Hutchinson, Kansas, but none of the rumored missing scenes were discovered. Dorothy Spencer, the film's editor, had been adamant that all the deleted elements had been shipped to Hollywood and stored by Deluxe. One man recalled seeing several rooms of film elements for Cleopatra, none of which have been found. 114. Unnamed collectors are rumored by Gigli to have the 8 + 1 2-hour assembly cut in black and white. They apparently showed portions from the film, but we don't know exactly what they have. It is not clear if Gigli has seen any missing footage himself. Fox was interested in restoring the footage, but the path went cold. 114, some lost footage has since been found, which includes Cleopatra walking through the camp outside Alexandria among dozens of extras. This was intended to be Cleopatra's first scene in the film. 33. It also includes a snake dance featured in the procession into Rome, where women dance in skimpy snake-like costumes. 33. Music. Main article, Cleopatra 1963 soundtrack. The music of Cleopatra was scored by Alex North. It was released several times, first as an original album and later versions were extended. The most popular of these was the deluxe edition or 2001 Verse Saraband album. Release. Cleopatra premiered at the Rivoli Theater in New York City on June 12, 1963, with an estimated audience of 10,000 spectators congregated outside. Among those present at the premiere were Rex Harrison, Walter Wanger, Joseph L. Mankiewicz, Daryl F. Zanuck, Jacob Javits, Richard Rogers, Joan Fontaine, Louis Nizer, and Beatrice Miller. Burton and Taylor were not in attendance. Taylor was in London and Burton was filming Becket 1964. 116 top ticket prices at the Rivoli were a record $5.55. Soon after the film's premiere, its running time was truncated from 244 to 221 minutes. 2 weeks after opening in New York, the film's release was expanded into 37 cities. 5. According to Barbara McLean, who co-headed Fox's editing department, the studio faced pressure from theater exhibitors and reduced the run time to 3¼ hours and eventually down to 2½ hours to maximize the number of showings. 117, according to the New York Times. The film's runtime was reduced to 184 minutes for its general theatrical release in the United States. 5. Elizabeth Taylor had attended a charity screening of the film in London and was distraught by the heavily reduced storyline, stating, They had cut out the heart, the essence, the motivations, the very core, and tacked on all those battle scenes. It should have been about 3 large people, but it lacked reality and passion. I found it vulgar. 118-119. Home media. Cleopatra has been released on home video on several occasions. The film was released on videocassette by 20th Century Fox Video in 1982-120. A 246-minute cut was released on Laserdisc in widescreen in 1990-121. A 3-disc DVD edition was released in 2001. The release included numerous supplemental features, including the 2-hour documentary Cleopatra, the film that changed Hollywood, 122. Sean Belston, Senior Vice President of Library and Technical Services at Fox, led a 2-year process that restored a 4-hour, 8-minute version in 2013. The original 65mm camera negative was located and used as a source. Fatting and damage to the negative were corrected digitally but with care to preserve detail and authenticity. 123, Belston's team also possessed the original magnetic printmasters, from which they removed clicks and hisses and created a 5.1 surround soundtrack. 123. On May 21, 2013, the restored film was shown at a special screening at the 2013 Cannes Film Festival to commemorate the film's 50th anniversary. 124, it was later released as a 50th anniversary version available on DVD and Blu-ray. Since Fox had long ago destroyed the negatives of the outtakes and portions of scenes that were cut during editing of the film, traditional outtakes could not be included. The home media packages did include commentary tracks and 2 short films, The Cleopatra Papers and a 1963 film about the elaborate sets, The Fourth Star of Cleopatra, 123. Reception. Critical response. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times called Cleopatra one of the great epic films of our day, crediting Mankiewicz for his fabrication of characters of colorfulness and depth, who stand forth as thinking, throbbing people against a background of splendid spectacle that gives vitality to this picture and is the key to its success. 125, Vincent Canby, reviewing for Variety, wrote that Cleopatra is not only a supercolossal eye filler, the unprecedented budget shows in the physical opulence throughout, but it is also a remarkably literate cinematic recreation of an historic epic. 126, for the Los Angeles Times, Philip K. Scheuer felt Cleopatra was a surpassingly beautiful film and a drama that need not hide its literate, intelligent face, because it happens to have been written, not by Shakespeare or Shaw, but by 3 fellows named Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who also directed it, Ranald MacDougall and Sidney Butchman. These are at any rate the names on the screen credits, and they have done their job with integrity. 127. Time magazine harshly wrote, as drama and as cinema, Cleopatra is riddled with flaws. It lacks style both in image and in action. Never for an instant does it whirl along on wings of epic elan. Generally it just bumps from scene to ponderous scene on the square wheels of exposition. 128, James Powers of The Hollywood Reporter wrote, Cleopatra is not a great movie, but it is primarily a vast popular entertainment that sidesteps total greatness for broader appeal. This is not an adverse criticism, but a notation of achievement. 129, Claudia Cassidy of the Chicago Tribune summarized Cleopatra as a huge and disappointing film. The cast, she lauded Rex Harrison's brilliantly quizzical Caesar, the best written role in Joseph Mankiewicz's erratic script, and haunted by Richard Burton's tragic Mark Antony, an actor's triumph over a writer's mediocrity. And with a prodigal gesture of futility, all of it is focused on Elizabeth Taylor, hopelessly out of her depth as a fishwife Cleopatra. Penelope Houston, reviewing for Sight and Sound, acknowledged that Mankiewicz tried to make this a film about people and their emotions rather than a series of sideshows. But for this ambition to hold up over the film's great footage, he needed a visual style which would be more than merely illustrative dialogue really worth speaking and actors altogether more persuasive. As the sets seem to grow bigger and bigger, so progressively the actors dwindle. 131, Judith Christ in her review for the New York Herald Tribune concurred, so grand and grandiose are the sets that the characters are dwarfed, and so wide is his screen that this concentration on character results in a strangely static epic in which the overblown close-ups are interrupted at best by a pageant or dance, more often by unexciting bits and pieces of exits, entrances, marches, or battles. 132. At the time of the film's release, the New York Times estimated that 80% of film reviews in the United States were favorable, but only 20% in Europe were positive. 5. Among contemporary reviews, American film critic Emmanuel Levy wrote retrospectively, much maligned for various reasons, Cleopatra may be the most expensive movie ever made, but certainly not the worst, just a verbose, muddled affair that is not even entertaining as a star vehicle for Taylor and Burton. 133, Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian wrote the film is a stately but sometimes mind-boggling spectacle. This restored big-screen version shouldn't be missed. It's a colossus of the analog epic era, and the high point of Elizabeth Taylor's global celebrity, when her prestige was hardly less towering than that of the actual Queen of the Nile. Billy Mowbray of British television channel Film 4 remarked that the film is a giant of a movie that is sometimes lumbering, but ever watchable thanks to its uninhibited ambition, size, and glamour. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 56% of 43 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 5.910. The website's consensus reads, Cleopatra is a lush, ostentatious, endlessly eye-popping epic that sags and collapses from a and how could it not 4-hour runtime. 136. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 60 out of 100 based on 14 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. 137. Box office. 3 weeks into its theatrical release, Cleopatra became the #1 box office film in the United States, grossing $725,000 in 17 key cities. 138. It held the top position for the next 12 weeks before being dethroned by the VIPs, which also starred Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. It recaptured the #1 spot 3 weeks later, 139, and proved to be the highest-grossing film of 1963, 140, by January 1964. The film had earned $15.7 million in distributor rentals from 55 theaters in the United States and Canada. 141-142, it finished its box office run with $26 million in rentals in the United States and Canada. 143, the film was also a major hit in Italy, where it sold 10.9 million tickets. 144, it sold a further 5.4 million tickets in France and Germany. 144, and 32.9 million tickets in the Soviet Union, when it was released there in 1978. 145, Cleopatra was the most popular film in Polish cinemas in 1970, and by the end of that year, over 25,000 screenings had taken place in Poland. With over 5.7 million tickets sold, 146. By March 1966, Cleopatra had earned worldwide rentals of $38.04 million, leaving it $3 million short of breaking even. 147. Fox eventually recouped its investment that same year when it sold the television broadcast rights to ABC for $5 million. 148, a then record amount paid for a single film. 149. The film ultimately earned $40.3 million in worldwide rentals from its theatrical run. 148. Awards and nominations. The film won 4 Academy Awards from 9 nominations. 151. It also earned Elizabeth Taylor a Guinness World Record for the most costume changes in a film, 65. This record was eclipsed in 1968 by Julie Andrews with 125 costume changes in the film's star. 20th Century Fox mistakenly submitted Roddy McDowall to the Motion Picture Academy for consideration as Best Actor, rather than as Best Supporting Actor, for the Academy Awards. The Academy deemed his role ineligible for a leading actor category, and told the studio it was too late to submit him in the correct category because the nomination ballots had already been sent to the printers. 20th Century Fox then published an open apology to McDowall in trade papers, stating, "We feel it is important that the industry realize that your electric performance as Octavian in Cleopatra, which was unanimously singled out by the critics as one of the best supporting performances by an actor this year, is not eligible for a nomination in that category, due to a regrettable error on the part of 20th Century Fox."